All right, we are rolling. All right, welcome everyone to today's presentation and happy Earth Day. We are excited to discuss today's topic, which is retention and the metrics that help you excel in this vital area of fundraising, with the hope that you leave empowered to better serve your loyal donors and constituents. And as people are coming into the Zoom webinar, we'll just go over a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, we will send the recording of this presentation out in case you have to drop or are not able to attend. And if you have any questions, you can ask them at any time using the Q&A panel in your Zoom toolbar. We've got a few questions that we are going to seed into the presentation today. So be ready to go ahead and have those that Q&A toolbar pulled up and ready with your answers. We may answer any questions that you have outside of the ones that we'll be asking during the presentation if it's kind of relevant to the current topic. Otherwise, we reserve the final 5 to 10 minutes of our meeting today for your questions. Without further ado, my name is Leah Davenport and I serve as our Senior Marketing Manager here at Pursuant, and I am thrilled to introduce our two main presenters today. The first is Rebecca Segovia, our EVP of marketing. She oversees the GivingDNA platform. She's got many years of working with clients in the industry and will do a much better job of introducing herself than I will. And so I will go ahead and kick things off with her.
Oh, thank you, Leah. I really appreciate the time. Yeah, I've been a nonprofit for 20 years, 10 of that on the nonprofit side and 10 of that on the agency side, helping nonprofits achieve their vision and mission as they think about their strategies. And some of that has also been in technology. So excited to share with you today some of the reporting that is already out and hopefully you've had a chance to consume. And then how we can uncover the giving DNA of your constituents to drive stronger retention. I'll let Ryan take a minute and introduce himself, and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leah and Becca. Glad to be here today. I head up client success for the GivingDNA platform. I have about a decade of experience in the nonprofit space, both working on the agency side and directly at organizations. Background is really about data and making data-driven decisions. Spent a lot of time in mid-level fundraising, and that allowed me to really touch all levels of fundraising.
All right, so our agenda today, we're just going to take a quick deep dive into the benchmark studies that have come out. Specifically, we'll be looking at the M&R report and the Fundraising Effectiveness Project report. If you haven't had a chance to check those out, be sure to do so. It's a good read. Then we'll jump into understanding the giving DNA of your supporters as it relates to retention. So what are the questions that we should be asking, and how can we get at that data that's meaningful to think about segmentation and customer journeys as we think about 2021 and beyond. And then we'll have some time for some Q&A. And as Leah talked about, we'll have some time actually throughout to ask you a couple of questions and really value your response to help us understand who's on the call and what you're struggling with so that we can customize our deeper dive around the challenges that you're actually experiencing. So the first report that we've got here on the screen is the M&R report. And so it's really more focused on online giving, but the headline here is actually a really important one. Nonprofits saw a surge in one-time giving and monthly giving in 2020. And so I'll be curious as we move through this to see if that was actually your experience as well. Before we actually jump into that question, I do want to highlight those that were nonprofits that were providing some sort of COVID relief, either directly or through their advocacy. They saw a 40% increase in online revenue. That's on the left side of the screen. On the right side of the screen, that is compared to 22% increase for those that did not do COVID work. So whether you were directly in COVID work or not, you still saw that increase in giving online. And then overall, that resulted in a 26% increase in monthly revenue online. So as we roll into our first question, I'm just curious, for those of you that are on the file, are you seeing these same trends in your file? How do you compare with those metrics? And are you seeing that online? Are you actually seeing the same thing in the offline world, whether it was through direct mail or any of the phone or any of the other channels that you may be using.
And for those of you in the call, we would love for you to use the Q&A panel at the bottom to go ahead and put some of you can say yes, you can say no, you can have a quick note. But we would love to just get a beat from you as to what you are seeing in your fundraising and what you saw in 2020, and if that lines up with your experience. And Becca, as we're waiting for some of those responses to come in, I think we can go ahead and move on to our next set of stats.
Yeah, don't be shy. We want to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
So as we look, so that was looking in the M&R benchmarks report. We're now moving into the AFP Fundraising Effectiveness Projects report. And this is actually looking at year to date all through 2020. So this is where this data is coming from. This was their Q4 report. That's why I said year to date. So if you have a chance, grab that report and peruse it. It's got some great information in there for you. But you may actually already be experiencing this. What they were seeing is that donors and dollars were up. So donors were up 7%, just north of it. And donations were up 10%, just over 10%, 10.6. But where we see the challenge and the question that we've been asking ourselves here at Pursuant and the GivingDNA platform is really around donor retention. So the next slide is going to show that donor retention across the board is actually down. Nonprofits only retained 43.6% of donors in 2020. And so it takes a lot of work. As you guys know, you're in it, you're trying to bring those new donors onto the file. And so how can we have greater retention rate is really the question that we're asking here. And then more specifically, donors, hard for me to say, new donors to the file. So new donor retention, those that just came on, saw a decrease as well. And so we are asking the question, as we see this influx of new donors coming onto the file, how do we actually think about retaining them in a different way? What things should we be curious about around those new donors? Are they one-time donors? Are they surge donors? Are they people that potentially are giving to causes that are like our cause that we could potentially build a relationship with? And so those are the types of questions that we're thinking about and asking as we think about donor retention, both new donor retention and reactivated donor retention. So the question that we have here for you is, what is your biggest retention challenge? Do you see that you are struggling more? Do you know, number one, and do you know if you're struggling more with overall donor retention? Is it isolated into new donors? Are you seeing a challenge with reactivated donors, or is it both? All of the above, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So Becca, I wanted to go ahead and go through a few of the responses that we got to question 1, which was, how do your metrics compare with these metrics?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll go ahead and flash that second question up while I get those responses to question 1. So we've got one response saying contributions last year were down. Another saying, yes, recurring gifts did increase. Another response is, we did a much bigger push for digital fundraising this year than in years past, so it's hard to assess. So maybe did things a little bit different and kind of hard to compare to previous years. Mm-hmm. Someone else said they saw an increase. One response is, looking at the total revenue compared to previous years, they have fewer donors, but actually more revenue. So
they're giving more dollars.
Yep, they're giving, that we saw an increase in giving from those loyal donors. Another response was the number of donors went down due to canceled events. And that the same respondent said the biggest challenge that they're facing is engaging those event donors.
And that's something that we've seen. We've talked a lot about events and virtual events and how to repackage and engage with people that do attend events. And I think it's important to understand who your people are, because if you have a heavy reliance on events and you couldn't have them over the past year, and that's still kind of shaping up for 2021, understanding what are the next best ways to engage and keep these people engaged and keep you top of mind is really critical. Not just doing what you had done in the past and then stopping it, but really understanding what's the best approach to take with those individuals.
Yeah, I agree. I think another point, I don't remember it was probably the second or third thing that you threw out, Leah, but it's that kind of macro step back. We as a nonprofit industry and as a world, were thrown into crisis. You know, we were kind of business as usual was happening. We had our plans, we had our strategies as we started into 2020. And then, you know, a pandemic hit us. And so we had to pivot and move into, we were actually in crisis, but move into that really quickly and then start thinking differently about our fundraising. And so it was really interesting last year to watch as the world kind of navigated that. And as the digital transformation is here. So hearing that some of you pivoted and spent more time, maybe events online, or just you saw online donations go up because the audience, that's where people were. Everybody moved into kind of their computers like we're doing right now on Zoom. And so that's where the audience was. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out as 2021 and 2022 unfold. Are we able to continue the stickiness in the digital space? Are we still growing in the offline space, whether events come back or direct response? So I am interested to continue to watch the trends as we go throughout this year to see, you know, what are the things that are going to stick and what are the things that are going to continue to improve. Ryan, were you going to say something?
No, just about those trends. One conversation I was having yesterday around telemarketing and how many
Yeah.
people felt it went by the wayside, but we're actually seeing an increase in effectiveness of telemarketing because more people are home. I'm working from home, so is Becca. I'm sure many of you are as well. And that allows for more of an opportunity to connect with people and get them on the phone. And not to mention, while things are opening up, there's still been a closeness where people are more open to actually speaking with other people because they don't have that social aspect in their life. So consider telemarketing campaigns and phone-a-thons, I would say, for the next few months anyway.
Yeah. And if you haven't had a chance to jump into one of our other webinars, we've actually looked at channel preferences. I'm sure Ryan will show us that as we dive into retention, as we think about the retention of the donors that are new to our file or that are on our file that we want to continue to keep in their second and third year of giving. You know, what are the best channels to reach out to them, and what strategy should we put alongside that, and what do those segments look like? And so we'll definitely show you some examples of where we would take that conversation. Let's go on and move on to the next slide. We've got that's okay. I think we kind of hit this home, but I just wanted to underscore it one more time. Retention really does need to be a focus in 2021. There are other things that we will probably also end up focusing on, but if we can nail retention and ultimately lifetime value and donor loyalty, if those donors can stick with us year over year, I think that is a good stride, a good goal that we should set for 2021, thinking about that across all the different segments that we can invest in, as well as areas of the pyramid. There's this quote that was in M&R, and so I just wanted to put it front and center for us just to sit with for a moment. The urgent desire to help during an emergency can drive surge in one-time giving. This is something that we all have experienced, whether it was the pandemic or things that have happened, hurricanes, all those things that there is an emergency, and crisis response is something that people will give to. The question then becomes converting this attention and generosity into long-term growth. It requires a commitment to retention. And so that's really where I believe GivingDNA can help. So as we navigate 2021, retaining new donors and engaging those existing donors, I think should be at the top of our to-do list, or near the top of our to-do list. I think that if we can leverage data to inform those strategies, that will make us better and stronger as we think about what are those segments and how do we hyper-personalize. And so our communication pathways. And so that's really where Ryan's going to take us. We've got a couple of scenarios that we have thought of in advance of our time together to say, okay, if I were thinking about retention around these specific segments, what are the things that I would want to know to be able to set up the best communication pathway? And so Ryan, I'll let you take that away.
Sure, thanks, Becca. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. All right, so let's log into GivingDNA. And when you log in, we're going to get brought to our homepage. And this is really built to provide you with the key metrics that are important to fundraisers. And as we're going to talk about today, new donors and retention. We also have key alerts, which I'll drill down on, and the key alerts that can support an increase in retention. And all these little boxes we can drill down into further. But let's start with looking at our new donors. So let me clean this up and only look at the last 5 years. This is an example. This is my demo account. And effectively, I'm looking at donors and gifts. And so let's start by looking at our new donors. And I can scroll down here to the bottom of life cycle and click on my new donors. And interesting, I'm not sure if you all know this, but new donors, this year aside, they are one of the largest challenges. The challenge being getting that second gift. And this is probably something many have grappled with over the years, but only Blackbaud study found that only 2 to 3 donors out of 10 make a second gift. So, this year it's particularly important to assess who our new donors are because many people saw an influx of new donors throughout 2020. But I think every year going forward, because it's a constant challenge to retain and upgrade as many of those new donors as you can, because it's just something that takes a lot of work. But once you do get those new donors to make a second gift, they're going to retain at a 60% rate on average. So that getting that second gift's really hard. Once you do that, though, you do have a sizable population of donors that'll end up being your key multi-year donors and retain at a nice level. And so I've identified here our new donors. And now that we have this segment, I think it's important. There's a couple different ways you want to look at them for retention. First, you want to understand who is most likely to renew. And to do that, we're going to go to our Constituents Dashboard. And so on the GivingDNA platform, we have a database of third-party insights that provide a wealth of demographic information. And so we can look at our donors and our clients' donors and say, all right, which of those people are in your database? And based on their name and address, we can then provide a lot of very valuable information to help inform on what they care about, the channels they prefer to engage through. And so in this example here, we've identified our new donors, and we can see that we've uncovered insights on a number of them. Now, for me, it's really important in this year to understand who is generally philanthropic and who has an affinity to support me versus who is, quote unquote, a disaster donor. And so to do that, you want to understand who's giving elsewhere, who's been giving actively over the course of the last year and made gifts more than to just your organization. And so here we can look at, of these 62 plus 100, about 85% are making gifts elsewhere. That's a good start. That's an indicator to me that, hey, these people are generally philanthropic. If you are thinking about budgetary concerns and saying, wow, we've got 10,000 new donors this year, I really only have the budget to spend and mail an additional 2,000 new donors. That's just the facts. Or I'm scared of spending money on 10,000 new donors and not getting any return. And so you could even go down further and say, well, I'm a hospital, a community hospital. I just want to look at those folks that I know are giving to other health-related causes. And that can help you really refine. We're starting to build out both the level of philanthropy and affinity so you can understand who's most likely to renew. Another good indicator of philanthropy is understanding of those gifts that are being made, are they making gifts sizable amounts? And so we know these donors are making gifts elsewhere outside of this organization that I've loaded onto the platform. And of those, we can say which ones are making gifts of a higher level. So say 500 plus. Can also understand where are they likely to support again, right? So understanding not only where they've given to you, but we can tell through the GivingDNA platform based on 1,000, 1,300 different data points where people are most likely to give, what type of cause. And so you could further double down and say, I only want to look at people that are likely to make a gift to another healthcare organization. And then finally, understanding the channel that you're most likely to engage them through. Because again, new donors at any point in time, it's critical to create engagement immediately after that first gift. And that could be a welcome series where you thank them appropriately and then begin to engage them through 2 or 3 different emails or mailings. And then finally, once they're primed and they're paying attention, ask them for that second gift. And so to do that, you want to be able to reach them. And if you're a digital shop, understanding those that you can reach through an email is important. We basically can see here where people prefer to engage based on their transactional behaviors, purchases, and gift giving. Or if you're a mail shop, and mail does again cost money, looking at those that are most likely to engage and prefer mail, that could drastically increase your ROI on this new group of individuals. And I would just save this segment. And from there, I'd export a spreadsheet, and I'd have that list that I could either send to my mail shop, or if I was going to go the digital route, drop it into my EDS like Constant Contact.
Ryan, we had a great question come in. If I can pause you for 1 second.
Yeah.
And Michael wants to know, so where does this demographic and philanthropic data come from?
That's a great question. I wasn't taking the approach of a demo here, where I would go into the more details, but we have a data partner called Axiom. They're one of the country's leading data marketing companies. They've been doing it since the 60s, and they have publicly available data that they aggregate, and it's fully licensed. None of it is web scraped. And they work with Fortune 500 companies, leading nonprofits directly go to them. They get data appends, as well as organizations like us here at Pursuant, so we can provide our clients with this data. And what's great about this, unlike a one-time data append, we upload our data on a monthly basis. So if you get new donors, or even if just your present donors that have been on file for years, their life changes. And so it's important to know what those changes mean about them, and how that reflects the way you communicate with them. And so that's one approach to consider your new donors and how to best engage with them to increase the likelihood of retention. Because again, new donors any year are the hardest group to retain. But you know what? There's also a lot of opportunity on file too, because if you've gotten new donors, and I love doing this with our clients, looking at your new donors to understand the value that they have on your organization. And so another thing to look at is who has mid and major value. And if you just want to look at your donors that have given, the annual fund or general fund under $1,000, say, but which of them have signs of wealth, philanthropy, and affinity that would lead you to say, I want to personally engage with them, or if I have a research team, have a prospect researcher, go really deep onto that individual. And so for me, the way I look at who's valuable, it's beyond wealth, but I do start with wealth and say, all right, people that have an income over $100,000, and we have a sizable income. I also want to know people that have a disposable income. And so we can look at a predicted discretionary spending. This tells you how much spending they have annually, how much disposable income. And so we've looked at, these are our new donors in the annual fund. I know that they have high home incomes, and now I know that they have a high disposable income. But that's not really the full picture. I also want to know how philanthropic they are. So similar to just looking at a profile of my new donors, as I'd done a moment ago, let's look at those that are giving elsewhere, or to be more specific, and you could say, I'm a cause that supports children. You could say, who's got a greater share of wallet for children's causes, and click on that. And then lastly, understanding if they're making sizable gifts. So let's look at only those that are making gifts over $500.
While that's loading, what I love about this is the ability, as in that first example, to say, okay, from a direct response standpoint, here's how I want to target these groups of new donors. So these are the people that would be channel responsive in mail, phone, as we talked about, and potentially digital, and then some combination of that, because we know that an omni-channel approach is actually a really good one, but just which one do you lead with, to see if we can get them to take action. But in this scenario, so you could then slice out and say, okay, these are the people that, look and feel more like our direct response donors, but hey, there's some new donors that came into our file this year that potentially could give at a mid-level or a major gift. So being able to look at this really quickly and have the right kind of onboarding experience, if you will, if they are a potential mid-level donor or a major donor. So this just helps you really quickly delineate on, okay, what pathway do I actually want to take this particular segment or group through?
Yeah, Becca, that's a great addition. And so with these high value donors, the next thing I would want to do is dig a little bit deeper. And so I've saved this segment already. I'm going to go ahead and pull them up and look at the individuals. So we've created some of this criteria that says, hey, these are new donors. that I know fit this criteria, but now I want to see that for each individual. And I would scroll over here and click on this person, X that out. And what I would then look at is, okay, at the individual level, as this loads up for me, I have children at home on tablets, excuse me, everybody. A little slow load today. So now I'm looking at all of those insights on my new donor that I've kind of created this segment around using those filters on the dashboard and how it applies to that individual. And so I can take this and really understand who this person is, how they engage with my organization, what their wealth looks like, where else they're giving. So I kind of have an understanding of when I reach out to them for that first time, and oh, by the way, what channel can I most likely reach them? Well, this person is likely to be reached on any channel. So for me, I would just say pick up the phone. But it gives you a really good starting point to understand what you can talk to them about, what they care about, understanding that they're giving to these type of causes. Do you have anything with your organization that aligns with that? That's a good understanding. And then just understanding how they are giving. And so that would be a way to really take the approach of who your high value new donors are. Now, with all that said, there's another important group to focus retention on that Becca's mentioned a couple times, and that's your reactivated donors. So these donors maybe didn't give in 2019, and then throughout 2020, you've been able to reactivate them. We want to keep those individuals. And so, by identifying that group first and foremost, let's make sure we can identify who these people are. You could go through the same process that I went through with the new donors and slide over to the Constituents Dashboard and from there, understand what's the channel most likely to connect with them through. Are there any that slipped through the cracks before that have a higher value that you really want to make sure you retain and personally engage with? Or you could kind of understand what their profile is by going to the donor profile tool. And here on GivingDNA, we are able to tell you your overall donor file. Here's what they look like. And you could then compare who those donors are and see the profile of those reactivated donors. And in this situation, pretty similar. We both see that they're relatively older women. They have a professional technical background, whether that's an engineer or an architect, certainly wealth on the file and income, and they reactivated at a nice level, average gift of $199. And so if you do see that those are really similar, you can explore this segment further. Again, these are your reactivated donors, and you can understand, all right, what's the best way for me to communicate with them? What are their interests? Where did I miss the mark last time and they lapsed? Is there something I'm seeing through their other giving that I could maybe align with our organization? Another thing to consider is, and I'm going to go back to the home page. We had these alerts I mentioned earlier, and this is a big strategy that I couldn't emphasize more, is reaching out to your donors before they lapse. And unlike a LIBUNT list, for those of you that aren't sure what that is, it's they gave last year but not this year. That looks at the whole year. We've identified donors that are about to lapse because they haven't made a gift in 11 to 12 months. And so each month, if you upload your data, which best practices here would be uploaded on a monthly basis, but if you're creating a report in your CRM, you want it to run monthly to understand each month who hasn't made a gift in 11 to 12 months. And here you could do something as creating a single strategy for these individuals, and you could export that file and send them out an email or a mailing. Or, and what I've done with a number of our clients is we create subsegments based on the levels of giving. So do I have donors each month that are about to lapse that are my general low sum donors, and I'm just going to send out a nice email or mailing or maybe even a reminder to renew their support? Or do I want to look at those donors that are giving over $1,000? They're my mid and they're my major donors. And each month I want to pick up the phone and call them to personally cultivate and steward, in hopes that when that next email and mailing goes out, they're going to renew. And that strategy we actually do with a number of clients at the mid-level, and retention has dramatically increased in all cases. And so you could look at it from the giving level. You could also, again, the best way to make sure they don't lapse is making sure you're engaging with them. And so where are the channels that they are most likely to engage through. So you can hit them at 11 months and say, if it's somebody that prefers email them with just, a very powerful message. Doesn't even have to be an ask, but you'll know that their eyes will get on it and see you and that you'll be top of mind. Same thing for mail or even the phone. And the last strategy that I wanted to mention today about supporting retention and growing retention is not only these people that you're reaching out to before they lapse, but old adage is the best way to retain your donors is to get them to give on a regular basis. And what I mean by that is getting them to become recurring donors, monthly sustainers. And so, you could very well send out an ask every month and include the, tag to give monthly. With GivingDNA, we're doing it a little bit more strategically. We're able to identify donors that are likely to give monthly based on their behavior to you, how they've been giving over the last few years. And with that, you could do the same thing I've talked about through the lapse group. You could export them and then just include a more direct ask to give to you monthly. Or you could further refine it and say, all right, who are the people that I want to send this out through a targeted communication through email or mail? And so those are just some of the ways that we think about increasing retention. We think about upgrades, who are the right people to upgrade, what are the channels to reach them through. And if you have any questions about that, I'm glad to answer them. And thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to go ahead and get our slides back up. And while I do, I saw a great question come in that was around kind of I would say around the confidence that we have that these GivingDNA automated segments are accurate, that the people we pull out of them that we predict are going to behave certain ways will actually do so.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We have a number of case studies on our website that show the efficacy and how these segments and the data that we're receiving are working. But I would say to this that on GivingDNA, much like other data companies out there, we are matching your people with our data insights at the name and address level. So it's first name, last name, full mailing address. So when I say that this person has a medical profession and they give to a veteran's cause, I know it's Ryan Carpenter at 37 Eastman Ave, Foxborough, Massachusetts, and not Stacy Carpentier down the road. So that's the first thing, is actually making sure we're matching them. Then the data in and of itself, well, we work with, if not one of the leading data marketing companies in the country in Axiom. Axiom has been doing this for over 50 years, and they're trusted by some of the leading Fortune 500 companies. And as I said before, nonprofit organizations. So they really know what they're doing. There's maybe one other company out there that we've used actually before to support GivingDNA with data, and we switched to Axiom because we found that they had a more diverse and extensive data set. I hope that answers your question.
All right, so if you have any more questions around GivingDNA platform or anything that we've discussed so far, please feel free to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A. We did have one question just come in about the GivingDNA platform in particular, and it had to do with whether or not this platform is a CRM on its own, or if it sort of is meant to layer on top of your existing constituent CRM.
No, this does not replace your CRM. It works in support of your CRM. So we integrate with all CRMs out there, and effectively you pull the data out of your CRM, your constituents and your gifts, upload it into GivingDNA, and then we can tell you a lot more about your people. We can also help you easily understand giving metrics that may not be as easily wrangled in your CRM. Although the CRM being much more robust, it typically, from our experience, requires your IT or data systems team to tell you what retention looks like at the mid-level, whereas on GivingDNA, you can quickly get to it. And so from there, you can create these segments and then you can export them in a CSV, just a list to say, all right, these are my new donors that are likely to engage through digital, and you can upload it into Constant Contact, or you can upload it into Salesforce and create an action campaign or something along those lines.
And I would even add that even if you don't have something that sophisticated, we've had stories of some donors doing campaigns straight out of Outlook and having great success with that. So there's lots of people who use these lists in creative ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as you continue to put some questions in the chat, I see a few that I'd love to kind of save for the end because they're really great questions. I'd love to have a little bit of time to chew over. But while we've got a few more slides we'd like to go into, and so I'm going to hand things off to Becca to go into some of our proof points and wrap it up with a few additional thoughts on retention.
So we kind of have a so what now what slide coming up. So we've got all these great ideas around segmentation. So kind of what are the first steps that we need to take? I think the question came in a few minutes ago of like, how are other clients using it? So we've got 2 proof points here on the slide. And as Ryan mentioned, we've got several on our website at GivingDNA.com. So feel free to check those out. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So step 1, this is probably my most favorite one. How do we think about donor retention and put that into action? And so I know we all know to say thank you, right? That's the thing that we do. We say thank you for your gift. But the real question here is, how do we say thank you in a way where we're making the donor the hero of the story, and they see how their dollars impacted your organization's mission, if you will, the outcome of your organization. Step 2 is tapping into donor motivations and reinforcing the donor's decision to make their gift. And so some of what we just looked at in the GivingDNA platform helps you understand a little bit of the donor motivation, not all of it, but at least a picture of who they are and how they think. And then also paying attention to the things that they have been giving to over time. That also gives you insight into their donor motivation. So as you're following back up with them, reinforce their decision to, they're a hero in the story. They're helping make things possible that were not possible before, and they're doing it in things that are actually important to them. You're aligned on the heart level. And then open the door. You guys know this. We need to open the door to deeper conversations. Don't be afraid to ask kind of the powerful questions. We had a white paper out, I think last month, that was on powerful questions. Feel free to download that and use those to help deepen the relationship that you have. Whether it's people that are going to kind of live in the annual fund direct response world, or people that potentially can give more dollars. How do we deepen that connection and give them a chance to give more, or give more often, monthly giving? And then finally, invite them to continue their impact. Let's not be afraid to continue to ask them to support an organization that they've already shown that they care about and they've given a gift to. So those are a few things that we think are good next steps as you think about these specific segments that we've talked about today. We also have created a resource that is available to you for free. You can look it up at pursuant.com/retention-ebook. And we'll also include it in our follow-up email that will include a link to the webinar. That's the Fundraiser's Guide to Donor Retention, how to keep the donors you work so hard to get. And it has some of the steps that I just talked about outlined in it, as well as some real life examples of what that communication can look like. And some great food for thought as you think about what is this year's retention strategy going to look like as we try to retain all of those new donors that came on the file, while also getting ahead of those that potentially are about to lapse and putting the right message in front of them, and then also thinking about reactivated donors, so people that came back onto your file, we want to move them into a continuing relationship with us. And so feel free to download that, and we're available if you have any questions. And last, but certainly not least, if you want to see what your data looks like, we are happy to give you a customized tour in GivingDNA. You can upload your data. We can walk you through what we're seeing related to the segments that you actually just saw Ryan walk through in this presentation, and make some good strategic decisions on, okay, here are the segments that I want to focus on as we think about 2021 and beyond. And so you can use the QR code here, or visit pursuant.com/GivingDNA Platform. All right, Leah, I think we have some Q&A that you have been holding for us.
I have.
Let's go.
All right. So I like this question. It's a little bit more of a philosophical one, but Jay wanted to know if it's possible that getting the second gift from a new donor isn't the driver of retention. And I'm kind of paraphrasing the question, so I want to make sure I get it right. But retention is also around how acquisition is designed. So is it, designed to get a transaction, or is the process designed to actually create a donor with lifetime value?
I would say, and Becca, you'll probably be able to add more to this, but it's a great question, Jay. Under either circumstance, the donor has very little of a relationship with you, right? And so I think that means you have to really drive towards creating that engagement immediately after that first gift is made. So no matter how you go about that acquisition, that ask, whether it's transactional or if it's donor based, making sure that you are taking a concerted effort to continue that engagement. And that's what when I talked about welcome series, it's not just the thank you, it's thanking them, but immediately following up with, more about your organization and trying to do it in a way that you believe that those people will be interested in a series of that, then following it up with a second ask. So I think regardless of how they're acquired, making sure that you right off the bat continue to engage with them is critical.
Yeah, I agree. I love this question. So first of all, I think part of what you're asking, and Jay Chad, if I'm missing it, is acquisition designed to be transactional? Like, what does that acquisition look like? And so I think we need to think about that. What are we putting in market from an acquisition standpoint, and are we setting ourselves up for success from the very beginning? And we know that some donors are going to, as we saw last year, going to be crisis donors, and they're potentially going to be just giving for that one event and they're gone. And that's okay. We can bless and release them, but we want to find the people that's hearts align with our cause, and want to give more over time. And so that's really what we're trying to suss out. And so I love the question just around, what does acquisition need to look like? How does that need to evolve? And that may be something that we actually tackle in a follow-up webinar. So thank you for the idea. And then second gift. What does that second gift look like? What we've seen, at least in my time, is if we can get second gift, the sooner we can get to the second gift, the more likely you're able to retain that donor year over year over year. And so just thinking through what those strategies are. And then also just that personal approach. So now we've got data at our fingertips to be able to say, okay, these are the people that potentially right now where they are age and stage of life, because we're able to see that demographic data, they probably are going to be an annual fund giver for now, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be a planned giver at some point, or that they're not going to be able to be a mid or major donor down the road. And so just kind of getting clear on where are people at this point in time in our file and what's the right next step for them. And I happen to think that's a two-way conversation. So.
Thank you, Becca. Here's another one that I really liked that had to do with it's kind of more around the topic of acquisition, but I think it ties in well to what you just spoke to, which had to do with designing that experience. But we have an attendee who they've been mostly relying on grants in philosophic support, and they're a community service organization, but they want to transition into getting more annual gifts, more support from donors, and not being so heavily reliant on grants. And today we're kind of having a conversation about retention and software, but how would you answer that question, kind of in light of a few things we've discussed?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is, hey, we have a funding model that has been grant based, if I'm understanding the grant and foundation based.
Yes.
And so now we want to broaden our horizons, if you will, and see if we can build an individual giving channel or leg of the stool as we think about fundraising. And so that requires us to think a little bit differently on just what does that holistic plan look like, and who's in our inner circle right now. And so I'd want to know a little bit more. So what are the available acquisition channels that you have? What does your core base look like? And typically when we're building from scratch, if you will, we'll start with kind of mid-major donors who are the close friends. And then how do we build out from there? There's also budget associated with, if I need to think about mass acquisition, We can do that. That is a strategy, but as what we were talking about earlier, we've got to ensure that it's on a transactional acquisition strategy. I loved that question, but how do we bring people onto the file that actually have affinity to our cause and would likely give more over time? And so being really strategic in that question. Pursuant has a product that actually helps with that. It's called the market opportunity analysis, and it allows us to kind of do that research for you. So if this is what your cause is, this is what your demographics of your existing donors are, here's what your desired demographics are. And here's where you're located. Are you like local or are you nationwide? We can help you think through, okay, what is possible today versus 5 years from now if I were to fund a plan that would to be built out an individual program across annual fund, mid, and major. So that is work that we do. So I'd be happy to talk with you more offline on that, but great question.
All right, I think we are right at 12:45, and I believe we promised that our presentation today would be 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Before I wrap up, Becca, Ryan, any other comments or questions?
Thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us and be curious about retention. And as we mentioned a few moments ago, we are here to be a partner with you to help you think through your segmentation and what your next steps might be as you think about retention for annual, mid, and major.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, Ryan and Becca, both for the time that you've spent engaging with our attendees today and going over some of these metrics. Super timely topic and something that I know a lot of fundraisers are asking right now as we're looking into the rest of the year, Q2 and beyond. And so Pursuant is here to help you every step of the way. And yes, we will get Becca and Ryan's contact info to anyone who has some specific questions that you wanted to take offline. And if there are any other questions that I see popping in right now, we will be sure to follow up with you in email. We will download the questions report as soon as we wrap today. So we'll be getting you an answer promptly. Thank you everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.